The last time I was on board Balmoral was in 2008, when she was just a few weeks into her inaugural season with Fred Olsen. Back then, she was fresh from a transformative refit, and her offering of a quintessential British cruising experience was undeniable. I'm back on board now to find out whether Balmoral has been ageing gracefully, or whether time has really been catching up on this old girl. One of the many things that has shocked me about Balmoral is how she's a 36-year-old ship, but she doesn't feel like that. Cruise ships are very, very lucky if they see past 30 years. There has been many cruise ships that have been scrapped in recent years, much younger than what Balmoral is today. An indicator which does show her age, and I have to say I was really surprised when I saw it because you do not encounter it nowadays, is the amount of decks where there's camber. So what is camber? Camber is when the deck is raised at the centre line and then it slopes towards the outer decks, and this really helps with stability and drainage. Out of all the places on this ship, it is most noticeable in here. When you walk through, you can see that the deck is just sloping. It really does feel like you've had a bit too much to drink after your dinner when you walk through here, particularly if Balmoral is sailing through rough seas. You're probably thinking, well, why have a sloping deck inside the ship? How does that help with drainage? Well, the short answer to that is that when this ship was constructed, where we're standing now was an outer deck. This restaurant and spa next door were created to accommodate the extra passengers which would come from that midsection which Fred Olsen installed when they took ownership of this vessel in 2006. So Balmoral had quite a few things done when she was in dry dock in Falmouth just last week. She had a lot of technical stuff doing. For example, Fred Olsen have retrofitted some brand new stainless steel propellers. One interesting thing about this installation is how long they last. This is really, really positive because it implies and suggests that Fred Olsen plans to keep Balmoral in their fleet for many more years to come. Many of the cabins have had work done, particularly the bathrooms in the suites. They've had new tiles put in, new basins, new surfaces. There has been some cabins that have had new carpet, but from our experience in the suites and cabins that we've looked around so far, the carpet hasn't been changed, but it's not in need of being changed. They have installed a new video screen in the Neptune Lounge to enhance productions in there. I have to say it is one of the smallest video screens I've ever seen when you think about what you get on the likes of Celebrity Beyond and the other Edge class ships. It is tiny, but nonetheless it will enhance the productions that take place in the Neptune Lounge. Without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest work to be undertaken on Balmoral during her refit was getting rid of the Palms Cafe, which was of course the buffet style restaurant on Balmoral before the refit, and that has now been replaced with a much larger restaurant called the Thistle, which obviously pays homage to Braemar and her main dining room. And of course, any Fred Olsen cruiser will know Braemar was a fleet-wide favourite who left the fleet couple of years ago. And by adding the Thistle restaurant, they have sadly had to remove Vasco, which was one of the speciality restaurants on board. This isn't a posh ship, but if you come on here and you expect it to be like Queen Mary 2, then you're going to be in for a disappointment. It's not that sort of ship. And Fred Olsen are not trying to create that, to be fair to them. They know their market very well. They know that they tend to appeal to an older demographic, and that demographic is seeking a more cosy, intimate, homely feel on board. And on the large part, they've really pulled it off. There's no point going searching for wow factors on this ship because you're not going to find any. But I think it actually adds to her charm. Another great thing about Balmoral is how easy she is to navigate, and that's quite handy when you consider the average age of a passenger on this ship. When it comes to her ability to handle her capacity of just over 1,300, on the large part she handles it well, but if we were to compare it to the likes of Borealis and Ballet, those ships do handle their capacity quite a bit better. Something that is quite interesting is that this ship has a very, very similar capacity to Borealis and Ballet, but Borealis and Ballet, their gross tonnage, which bearing in mind that is not how much she weighs, that is the linear internal volume of the ship. Those ships have a gross tonnage of around 20,000 tonnes more than this. That is a considerable difference when you consider that that was around about the gross tonnage of Braemar before she had her extension many years ago. So this inevitably is going to have an effect on capacity. It does put pressure on the lifts particularly. To be honest, we've done a lot of stair walking on this ship because we just can't be bothered to keep waiting around for lifts, and you do have quite a wait. And you could argue that there is a bit of a shortage when you factor in the amount of passengers on here, only having a couple aft and a couple forward, and there being no midsection lifts to use. Balmoral is a ship for those that are constantly getting angry and disgruntled with cruise lines that are constantly trying to evolve or renew their product to try and appeal to a younger demographic. And to be honest, that's been one of our frustrations over the years, is how many cruise lines, particularly the larger ones, it feels at times like they're all morphing into one another because they all have very similar offerings. They all try and copy each other with facilities and venues to add to their ships. You have to really give credit to Fred Olsen that they haven't been tempted to go along with the crowd and to look at transforming their product. I started cruising with Fred Olsen in 2005. One thing that's really amazed me being on here so far is just how Fred Olsen has actually been stuck in a bit of a time warp. You know, there hasn't really been any changes, if truth be told. They're still using the same carpet. We went to the entertainment last night and Mickey Zaney was in there performing. He was literally on Braemar on my first cruise in 2005. The service is as good as it was back then. The food is as good as it was back then. You know, they haven't looked at upcharging everywhere they can, which has really amazed me, to be honest, and also baffled me at the same time. So if you're seeking a traditional and a more classic cruise experience, I would say the Balmoral is a good ship for you. Moving on to accommodation, unfortunately there were no inside, outside or balcony cabins available for us to view on this cruise, so instead we'll be focusing on 3 suite categories, a low-end, mid-range and high-end option, giving you a well-rounded glimpse into what Balmoral has to offer if you have the cash to spend.
So this cabin here is a balcony junior suite, and for the cabin the size is quite large. So this is 200 square feet, which is only 20 square feet more than a balcony cabin. But the first thing I noticed when I came into this cabin was, unfortunately, it's a really bit shoddy. On the walls, there's bits peeling off. If you look on the other side, there's bits of stain running down the wall where it looks like, unfortunately, there was a leak. So something that is quite interesting and a little bit laughable about all these cabins is the thermostat. Interestingly, when you turn it down to the cold, it lets out a sigh that sounds like Phil Mitchell from EastEnders. Another interesting thing about all of the cabins on board, something that I really like, but Jay doesn't seem to like it, he finds it quite irritating, is that they all come with their own radio, which is, again, is a really old-fashioned thing, but if it's going to play for me, it's elevator music. But I quite like it when I'm getting ready to have a bit of background noise, but Jay finds it really irritating. Again, an old-fashioned thing, but I really like it. I think it's unique, I think it's quirky. Others might find it old-fashioned and annoying, but it's a tick from me. So this bathroom has clearly had some TLC done to her during the refit. She's got some new surfaces done here, a few new plugs. However, some things are missing. For example, up here there's a gaping hole where there's just air flowing out, what they've forgot to fix. There's paintwork and all markings up around the mirrors and up against the glass. It's a shame they've left these in. They could have fixed these, but I know they're probably up against the clock. But for a bathroom, it is fairly sized. It's got everything you would need, all the appropriate storage. It's a lovely bathroom, but unfortunately the imperfections just take away from the overall presentation of this bathroom. So when it comes to storage in these cabins, there is plenty. I mean, when it comes to drawers, there's more drawers in here than there is combined on RV and Iona. This ship is built for longer sailings. The amount of drawers and space on here is amazing. The wardrobes themselves come with plenty of hangers. We normally have to ask for cabin stewards for extra hangers, but on here we had more than enough for a 6-night sailing. Fred Olsen's minibar is fantastic. All cabins come with a minibar. The selection isn't to my taste. I can't see a can of Coke, but you do have our whites, some alcohol and a wine, a Chardonnay 2021. Again, not my cup of tea, but it will be for someone. But it's a nice offering. Many cruise lines these days actually don't offer a minibar service, and I think it's criminal. So the bed, it is firm. I like it. Some people might not, but that's down to personal preference. When it comes to storage next to the beds, there is drawers, which is great and handy, but there is no USB and there is no plugs, which is a little bit of a letdown. Again, I know the ship is old, so she didn't have them originally, but they could have added them in the refit, which would have been a nice touch. So something that hit me when I first walked in was this artwork, and I have to say, it's probably one of the ugliest artworks we have seen in a cabin. I mean, what this has to do with Fred Olsen or cruising or anything, I have no idea. So it is a fairly large balcony for this grade of cabin. There isn't many balconies on this ship. It would be nice to see some more comfortable chairs and a table to have breakfast at. The chairs are showing their age. They are a bit shoddy, they are a bit worn. They could have replaced them during their refit, which would have been nice. There is some rust showing, which again, I'm not surprised about with the age of the ship. Something that does surprise me though, is seeing an ashtray out here. When you consider there's only 11% of people in the UK that still smoke, it is surprising to see this still. Our next stop is a Superior Suite, offering 275 square feet of space. It's a step up in both size and cost. But does that extra space and the added perks justify the price tag?
This is the suite we've been kindly given by Fred Olsen. This is a Superior Suite, and this actually sits in the new section that Fred Olsen installed in the middle of the ship when they took ownership of her in 2006. So she is in a lot better condition compared to some suites and cabins on this ship. This is a decent sized suite. It measures 275 square feet, which is more than adequate for our needs. No criticisms really at all, except this window, which looks directly into the shower. I just can't get my head round. Originally, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, do you know what? We're going to blame this on NCL because this is the sort of mischief they get up to. But no, this is, as I said, this is one of the cabins that was installed by Fred Olsen. So this was their idea, which I really can't get my head round when you consider their demographic. Why someone felt that that was a necessary feature to this cabin, I'll never be able to understand. We have more bizarre artwork. Okay, I don't think it's as ugly as the one we've just seen in the Balcony Junior Suite, but a mysterious lady waiting for the milkman to arrive I find a little bit odd. And again, what the hell has this got to do with the price of biscuits? The bathroom is actually a really decent size, and again, it's more than adequate for us. Not really too keen on the toilet being behind a separate door. If you're on the larger size, it's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze in there for some. Not a fan of the shower curtain, as you know. It's a common feature with many old cruise ships. I do think they are slowly being phased out by cruise lines as they realise that most passengers find them a bit repugnant. You get 2 basins, you've got plenty of storage behind the mirrors above the basins, and you've got some shelves down below. Nothing too wow, it's just absolutely fine. Again, gross. Very similar to the Balcony Junior Suite that we've just looked at. One of the best features about the Superior Suite is the abundance of storage. Huge wardrobes with drawers, shelving, plenty of hanging space, plenty of hangers. You've got plenty of power outlets over there by the desk. You've got 5 European sockets. You've got a US socket. No USBs, again, unfortunately. As Dan said, that does seem to have been overlooked when this ship went in for its refit, and I do think it's a bit of a shame. This Superior Suite costs around £2,500 for a 7-night no-fly cruise out of Southampton. Do I think that's worth it? Well, it's a nice suite, but I don't know if I would pay £5,000 for the pair of us to have just a larger suite. When I'm spending that sort of money, I am expecting just some additional benefits, whether it be access to a suite-only dining room or a suite-only terrace. You get priority embarkation and an atlas and a set of binoculars and things like that. But I would just expect a little bit more, and I wouldn't be prepared to pay £2,500 per person just to have a larger cabin, one with a window, which, as I've said, I find bizarre and a bit inappropriate. And now we've arrived at the pinnacle of lavishness aboard Balmoral, the Premier Suite. Spanning an impressive 601 square feet, it's more than double the size of the superior suite we've just explored. With a price tag of around £2,800 per person for a 7-night no-fly cruise, it's certainly an indulgence. I know if I brought my nan in here, the first thing she would say is, I love the carpet. Whereas someone I think of our age, and even our parents' age, I think we would look at the carpet and think, yeah, this is a bit frumpy. Does this feel luxurious? No. With the carpet, it actually feels a bit like an old people's home. It's like the sort of carpet you would get in a communal area of a retirement home. I can't say that this is a luxurious suite. There's not a jacuzzi on the balcony. You don't get a grand piano. These are just some of the features you get in a suite of this sort of grade with other cruise lines. When you book a suite and you're asking yourself whether it feels like luxury, you need to question what else you're getting with it. And with Fred Olsen, you're not getting much. You are really just paying to have a larger cabin, basically. It's not like going on Cunard and paying for a Queen's Grill suite and then you get access to your own dining room where you can eat lobster every night. That is what you're paying for with Queen's Grill. On Fred Olsen, it's a bit like Ambassador. You are paying to have a larger suite, so you've got more space, more room to unwind, but there's not those additional perks and benefits there. The biggest benefit to this suite is the size of it and how comfortable it is. You get some really nice comforts, like you get the coffee machine, you get a hairdryer, you've got 2 TVs, one in the lounge area here, another one in the bedroom. You've got 2 massive bathrooms, a dining area, a walk-in wardrobe. You know, you can easily be comfortable in here. The drawbacks are the fact that you don't have your own dining room, you don't have your own deck space, and I am a great believer in these things because I feel that a suite experience should be all-encompassing. For what you're paying, you should feel like you're royalty. Now that we've seen 3 grades of suite on Balmoral, the question we've asked ourselves is, if we came on here and we paid with our own money, what grade of suites would we choose? For us, the Balcony Junior suite that we looked at is more than adequate for our needs, and it's practical, it's comfortable. I don't think we would need to go above that. I don't think there are enough perks or benefits with this grade of suite or the one below it, like the superior suite, to warrant a further upgrade. So I don't think this is a luxurious suite. It's very, very generous in terms of size, and I could be very, very comfortable in here, but I don't think I would personally pay for it.
Get 50% off your first order when you subscribe to Sail Away magazine. Get the digital version for £3.95 and the printed edition for £6.95 every 2 months. Subscribe today at sailawaymagazine.com. Food is always one of the most important aspects of any cruise or holiday, but on a smaller ship like Balmoral, does the choice and variety live up to the offerings on much larger ships? So you have 3 main dining rooms on board, the first one which we're in now, which is Ballandolloch, and then you have Avon and Spade, which is upstairs on deck 10. They're practically the same in the sense that they serve the same food, the same menu, but decor is obviously slightly different. So there's 2 sit-ins on board, one at 6 PM and one at 8 PM. There's no freedom dining, so it's up to you which one you pick, whether it's the early or the late. When it comes to decor of these dining rooms, this one is personally my favourite. I love the ceiling in here and the lights in the middle. The upstairs main dining are split on either side. They are lovely, but one critique I did find was that the big windows don't have blinds, which I find odd. So if you're sat there and you've got blinding light shining upon you, there's no way to get away from it, unfortunately.
Something was really obvious to us, not just on Balmoral, but when we sailed on Borealis in July of this year, is that there are no upcharge options on the main dining menu. That nowadays is pretty much unheard of. Most Americanized lines have upcharge options, whether it be lobster benedicts on Holland America on their breakfast menu. They do lobster mac and cheese on their lunch menu. And then there's also cruise lines like Royal Caribbean which charge extra for premium steaks, etc. It's just not a feature on the menus on here, and I do understand the affection that people have for Fred Olsen and how they keep things just really simple, really easy to understand. None of this nonsense trying to squeeze every penny out of you at every chance they get. Fred Olsen are also very, very accommodating to dietary issues. I'm a pescatarian, don't eat meat. I've had no issue whatsoever on this ship. When we sat down for our very first meal at Avon, on day one of our cruise, we were asked by our waiter and head waiter whether we have any dietary issues, which is great. It shows that they take dietary concerns seriously, which is always a thumbs up to us. And there's plenty of choice. Their menus are actually very, very generous in what they're offering you. You get an ever-changing menu each day of your cruise, which always features vegan, vegetarian and gluten-free options. So what I would say about the food is it top-notch, and does it scream luxury or premium? No. You don't see premium options on it like lobster, but what you do get is some hearty British favourites. Fish and chips on Fridays, casseroles, salmon and chicken breast. And to us, that's more than adequate. I don't actually need to have lobster every day of my cruise, and I know that the ingredients that they're using on Fred Olsen is quality. No doubt they had the same experience when we sailed on Borealis. There's one area, though, that bothers us when it comes to main dining, and we kind of knew about this before we actually joined. There's a common concern that's constantly raised on cruise review sites, and that is the temperature of the food that is served in main dining. It doesn't seem to be an issue in the Thistle downstairs, but we have dined in this dining room, Spey next door, and we're now in the Balmoral restaurant, and it is a running theme throughout. Food arrives either lukewarm or, absolute worst, it's very, very cold. And we've had to send dishes back, and that's really disappointing because we have no concern whatsoever with the ingredients, and I really hope that the maitre d' and the executive chef and Fred Olsen more generally can have a look at this issue, because it does seem to be something that's critiqued, and now that we've experienced it for ourselves, we do actually know that it is actually an issue. One of the most significant changes made to Balmoral during her December 2024 refit is the removal of the Bookmark Cafe and Vasco, making way for the Thistle Restaurant. But does this transformation truly enhance the dining experience on board?
So the buffet isn't massive despite ripping out Vasco, but the quality of the food in there is good, it's hot, I can't complain about it. But if you was to compare it to the bigger cruise lines like Royal Caribbean and Celebrity, yeah, they don't compete whatsoever. Those cruise lines offer far more variety. I can go on a Celebrity cruise and have lobster one day, and I can have Italian, I can have Spanish food, I can have what I want when I want. But on here, you're kind of limited. When it comes to variety and quality, it's miles ahead from the other cruise lines like Marella, P&O and Ambassador, so it gets a massive thumbs up from us. Something that does surprise me still with the buffet on here is that it still doesn't seem to cater for the amount of passengers on board. Every time we've been, there's always been quite a long queue to get in there. It's clearly struggling with the capacity of passengers on here, even though they did remove Vasco. With the removal of Vasco from Balmoral, guests are left with just one specialty dining option on board, but it's one that might not appeal to everyone's taste buds.
I'm in Colours and Tastes, and this is the only specialty restaurant on board Balmoral. It costs just £15 per person for a 3-course meal here, and I really have to say that does offer extremely good value for money. In terms of the decor, you're probably thinking that it's a little bit harsh on the eye, but compared to this restaurant on Ballet and Borealis, it's actually not too bad. Imagine this carpet throughout, and that is what you get on Borealis and Belette. It's enough to make Dame Edna Everage wince. The menu does offer a decent variety, especially when you consider the £15 per person cover charge, but it isn't the biggest menu I've ever seen at a speciality restaurant. If you're someone that isn't too picky, I think you'll be alright, but it's not going to be for everyone. I have to say, as much as I like this restaurant, I don't think it is as good as what Vasco was, and I think they did remove the wrong speciality restaurant, unfortunately. And I don't think that one speciality restaurant on a ship that tends to do much longer sailings of 45 nights or more each and every year is enough. I do think there needs to be a bit more variety. Maybe something that Fred Olsen could consider doing is maybe alternating nights in here with a different style of cuisine. After all, we started to see that with lines like Holland America, with Morimoto by Sea in Pinnacle Grill, for example. So it's easily feasible. They wouldn't need to change the deck or anything. It'd just give out a different menu, and it just gives more variety to diners. Beyond main dining, the buffet, and colours and tastes, Balmoral offers a handful of extra charge food options for those little indulgences. At the Bookmark Cafe, you'll find an array of tempting cakes and handcrafted chocolates to satisfy your sweet tooth. For something a little more refined, the Oriental Tea Room invites you to experience rare tea tasting sessions, perfect for tea enthusiasts. And on each sea day, you can treat yourself to a traditional afternoon tea in the Observatory, complete with finger sandwiches, scones and pastries, all for just £13.95 per person. Fred Olsen really know how to appeal to Brits.
People like to cruise differently. For some, it's all about the endless activities, surf simulators, ice skating rinks, and adrenaline-pumping activities at every turn. For others, it's about slowing down, relaxing, and taking each day at a leisurely pace, with time to savour the journey rather than rush through it. So, where does Balmoral fit into this spectrum? There is many quiet places to relax on this ship. This one in particular, the Lido Bar. Every time we've come here, there's been 1-2 people in it max reading a book or having a cup of tea, and same for other bars we've seen. There seems to always be a couple of people in there reading a book, but apart from that, it's normally dead, which is nice if you want something quiet and relaxing. But if you're looking for a busy ship with lots of noise and lots of entertainment going on and lots of hustle and bustle and games going on, this isn't the ship for you. So if sitting in a bar and lounge isn't your thing, you have got 2 beautiful pools on this ship, one at the top deck and one at the aft, and I have to say they are beautiful. We've seen many pools on cruise ships, and I have to say these are some of our favourites that we've ever seen. I wish we was actually sailing on her in a hotter climate so that we could take a dip. This pool is actually really, really big as well. On modern ships, you find that they're getting smaller and smaller. This is 6 foot deep. So Dan could jump in there and you wouldn't see him. And if swimming isn't your thing either, they've always got deck quits, they'll do a game of bingo, quizzes, and the quiet lounges are there for you if you just want to have a nap and read a book. It is worth mentioning that Fred Olsen is a destination-focused cruise line. So what is a destination-focused cruise line? It is really what it says on the tin. You will find that there's always a port talk for each and every port that they go to, so you get as much information before you even step off the ship so you can make the most of your time when you're there. We've found that the variety of shore excursions available on this ship has actually been very good, and Fred Olsen is one of the cheapest cruise lines when it comes to shore excursions. I mean, we were supposed to go to Paris for the day, a 10-hour tour, and they were charging something like £87. If that was on Celebrity, for example, you'd expect to pay probably about $300 per person. Evening entertainment aboard Balmoral is pretty much how I remember it. The Neptune Lounge remains the ship's main entertainment venue, and honestly, I can't believe they're still using the same comedian, Mickey Zaney, cracking the same jokes he was telling nearly 2 decades ago. But let's be honest, no one's booking a Fred Olsen cruise for West End style productions or Broadway level showstoppers, and that's okay, because in the areas that truly matter, Fred Olsen absolutely deliver. An area which is really important to us and other cruisers who appreciate a more traditional way of cruising is service.
So service overall, I have to say, has been much, much better compared to many of the cruise lines that we've tried this year. And it actually gives premium lines like Holland America and Celebrity a real run for their money. I don't actually think the service we had with those cruise lines this year was as friendly as what we have had on both Balmoral and Borealis this year with Fred Olsen. I know how important service is to us. And if you're like us and you're becoming disenfranchised with cruise lines like P&O and Cunard, where there has been a noticeable drop in service standards, I would honestly say consider a cruise with Fred Olsen, because not only are you getting an elevated level of service compared to what else is offered these days for a similar amount of money, but you're also getting that traditional, more classic cruise experience that you used to get with some of these other lines.
When it comes to upcharge on board Fred Olsen ships, there really isn't much. You have one specialty restaurant on board, the spas are fairly priced, the drinks packages are reasonable, and apart from that, there's nothing really else. Compared to other cruise lines where they'll have multiple Wi-Fi packages, multiple drinks packages, they'll have arcade machines, which is an upcharge. On here, it's kind of what you see is what you get. And when Fred Olsen is trying to charge you, it's not a con. £15 for a specialty restaurant, £22 for a men's haircut, and £4.50 for a gin and tonic. The only other cruise line that could give them a run for their money is Ambassador.
On the subject of Ambassador Cruise Line, it is important to compare the drink package offering from Fred Olsen with what you get on Ambassadors. With Ambassador Cruise Line, the Expedition drink package is £44.95, and that gives you a huge amount of choice where you have about 141 drinks available to choose from. Compare that with Fred Olsen, they only offer one drinks package, and it costs £24.99 on most voyages, but it costs around £35 on cruises of 5 nights or less. But it's very, very different. Although the price is significantly less than what you get on Ambassador, it only entitles you to 24 varieties of drink, and those are quite basic selections like house wine, house spirits, draft beers and ciders, and soft drinks by pump. It excludes many different drinks, and I'm not just talking about premium alcoholic beverages. It excludes things like cans of Coke, it excludes specialty teas and coffees, and that's a bit disappointing. One thing it is worth pointing out though with the Fred Olsen drinks package is that for the most drinks that aren't covered, you do get a 50% discount on other drinks. So for example, if you ordered a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which I believe is £9 off the top of my head, you would pay £4.50 for it. That's not too bad. So weighing that up, would Dan and I take out a drinks package with Fred Olsen? Probably not. It's not because we're saying to everyone that it isn't good value, it just isn't good value to us because we're not particularly heavy drinkers. We mainly live on soft drinks, like teas and coffees throughout the day, and the fact that you don't even get the discount with that, we probably wouldn't bother paying the £24.99. If you're like Dan and me and you feel that taking out a drinks package isn't for you and you'd much rather pay as you go, you're not going to be too put off by the prices. You can expect the prices of drinks to be around what you'd pay at a traditional British pub. I'm not talking about a pub in the north of England where it's cheap, and I'm not talking about a pub in London where you pay 20 quid for a bloody cocktail. I'm talking about more generally across the country, somewhere like we're from in the home counties, and you'd expect to pay about £7 for a Malbec. You'd pay around £14 for a glass of Lanson champagne. And when it comes to soft drinks, they're really quite cheap and they cost about £3 for a Coke. One thing which we would add to our cruise fare is the Wi-Fi package.
So when it comes to Wi-Fi, how much is it on board? It's actually £8 to £12 depending on the length of your voyage. Is the Wi-Fi good or better than what was on Borealis on our last visit? It is a little bit better, yes, but it's still not perfect. So for us, for example, when we try and upload something to Instagram or Facebook or video or something like that, it does struggle. However, I can seem to load a few TikToks, I can send emails and WhatsApps, that's pretty much it. Netflix, YouTube and everything else is completely out of the question. One thing I would love to see Fred Olsen do is actually upgrade their Wi-Fi packages. They are using Starlink at the moment, but it would be great to see if they took off some of the restrictions and maybe introduce some new plans so that people like us could upgrade the Wi-Fi package to use it more seamlessly for work purposes. But if you're someone that just wants to send a WhatsApp, a text message, and maybe load the odd TikTok, then this is fine for you.
Balmoral is a fantastic ship. Not glitzy, not glamorous, but incredibly cosy and homely, which for us holds far greater value. In an era where cruise lines are obsessed with gimmicks and penny pinching at every turn, Fred Olsen stands apart. They've maintained the service and dining standards that first won me over back in 2005, and for that, they deserve huge recognition. They haven't followed the crowd. Instead, they've focused on what truly matters to people like us. Smooth embarkation, comfortable cabins, great food, impeccable service, and the chance to visit ports which the larger ships cannot. Sure, Balmoral isn't the youngest ship afloat, but with the thoughtful investment and improvements Fred Olsen have made, we're confident that she will be cruising for many more years to come. For those seeking a cruise that values substance over flash, Balmoral is an excellent choice.